in and joining us, but I like to get the show on the road for all of you people who are nice and prompt. So thanks for being here. I'm just going to remind everybody at the format of these sessions. So we do keep the lines muted. I've sent, Karen and I have had a couple of conversations actually about what we're going to kind of dig into, but I like to think of this as I was doing Clubhouse before Clubhouse. Those of you who know what Clubhouse is, you know, it's like where you can get into rooms and talk and ask questions and get on stage. This is your opportunity to ask Cara what you would like to know about, you know, what it's like to be at the top of the house and, you know, some of the lessons that she's learned along her career. So I really want you to have that space. So as we're going along, drop those questions into the chat. I'm going to keep my eye on it. You can use the Q&A function if you want, or just the chat is fine. I'll watch both, but we're going to get things started. So Kenzie, you can stop screen sharing. That was like a tongue twister. Oh my gosh. All right. So Cara, welcome. Thank you so much for being part of this View from the C-Suite event, because we do these every once in a while. And I really appreciate the time that you've taken to be with us today. So thanks for being here. Yeah. And it was fitting because International Women's Day was yesterday. So I love that we've got, you know, the first female leader for PepsiCo Foods Canada. And just to let everybody know, it is Foods Canada. So, you know, we're not going to take Cara to task on plastic bottles or anything like that. It's a totally different part of the organization. But tell us a little bit about, you know, PFC. Give us a bit of a plug. What are you excited about for the company over the next 12 months?
Sure. Well, PepsiCo Foods Canada is largely Frito-Lay and Quaker portfolios. So we play in the breakfast and snacking categories. We have 6,000 employees coast to coast, 7 manufacturing sites in 4 different provinces, lots of farmers, Canadian farmers as well. And our vision is to create smiles. And I think, you know, over the last year, we've definitely seen the impact and the importance of that with our consumers. And, you know, over the next 12 months, we are looking at continuing to navigate our way through this pandemic and make sure that our business is going to come out stronger on the other side. So we're just in the process of building all of our strategy plans for the future. And so lots of really exciting things for the future to come.
Yeah, well, I've been fortunate to be able to partner with PepsiCo Foods Canada for a number of years now. I always joke with your head of HR that I feel like I should have a hoteling desk at your office. Because I feel like, and and over the past year in particular, I have been a big supporter of Frito-Lay products. I've always been a big supporter of Quaker products, but Frito-Lay products have made their way into my pantry, probably more than they should have. So glad to do my part to support the company in a lot of ways. So I wanted to talk to you because you stepped into this top job in sort of mid 2019, right? Around 7 months or so before the pandemic really hit. And I was joking around with you. I said, I'm guessing that Jay, when he was walking out the door, didn't hand you the here's how to lead in a pandemic playbook. So when everything started to go down, what were some of the first things that you did to kind of get yourself oriented and get the company through such a crazy time of uncertainty?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I should just say I want to thank you for your partnership. You run a fantastic program with us in terms of leadership development, and everyone raves about your work in the program coming out of it. So thank you for that, first of all.
Well, you're welcome.
Second of all, in terms of the pandemic, and you think about it, it was a year ago. It seems in some ways so long ago now. Mm-hmm. It was just this incredibly intense period of time that hit us. And we were deemed an essential business. So we knew that we had to prioritize safety first. And, you know, all of our employees working in plants and in stores, it was really important. And one of the first things we did was we came together as a team. So as a leadership team, we started meeting daily and just really kept communication high. And there was so much changing information that we were trying to be as transparent as possible, let people know everything they needed to know, but it was continuing to change so much. We also had to make some really tough decisions. We had to cut like 25% of our portfolio because we just couldn't keep up with supply in the early days. And we really wanted to make sure that we were empowering the team. So the teams closest to the decisions were the ones that were making those calls. So we cut 25% of our portfolio, and I didn't approve it. It was like, hey, you guys know the SKUs, the capacity, what we need to do for product supply best. You guys make the decisions. And then we just had to pivot because so many things, like basically our entire plan for the year all went out the window. And we just had to keep pivoting, keep changing, keep adapting. And I would say also operate with high levels of empathy, listening more than ever, trying to understand what people needed from us and when, and just having empathy for everyone's different situations.
Yeah, that empathy piece is so critical. I think it's been evolving through the pandemic. There was one kind of empathy when we were in uncertainty, and then there was another kind as this thing dragged on. And I feel like there's another kind now that's emerging for us as we're still in the throes, but there's kind of light at the end of the tunnel. So compassion and empathy is such a key one for leaders. When you look back and you sort of, with the benefit of hindsight being 2020, because it sounds like you had like a great plan, you had high communication, agile, nimble. I think it's really interesting. That must have been a muscle for you guys to flex, because as I know you guys, you're a very collaborative culture, and there is a lot of involvement around decision making. So letting go of those decisions and letting the team be really agile and pivot quickly. But is there anything when you look back that you go, I wish I'd been faster on that, or I wish there were things that we'd looked at differently or gone deeper on, or any sort of awareness?
Well, I mean, I wish we'd built up a couple of months of extra inventory. That would have been helpful.
Yeah.
But I think, we just did the best that we could. And we did lots of retrospectives along the way, and we took lots of learnings. So we were constantly evaluating whether we were doing the right thing and then trying to pivot and change. I think, with the benefit of hindsight, for me, it's just reinforced the importance of being agile and being ready for things coming your way. Because, I remember in February, I was talking to the head of China. We were at a meeting together in the US, and I was asking how things were going, and in Wuhan at the time. And I didn't think that we would be in that same position. I didn't foresee that we would, a month and a half later be in a similar position. And so I think it just really opened my eyes up that you need to be prepared for anything, really.
So on that then, has it changed how you think about scenario planning or future planning? Like, has that caused you to do anything differently, or for you guys to put in any different processes or systems in the organization?
Definitely. It's definitely shown us where we had some opportunity areas. And so as those came to the forefront, we've done what we can to try and close those gaps and fix those areas, whether it's adding more capacity, whether it's trying to build some agility and flexibility into our situations. It's tough because when you build a plan, you put all this work behind it, and it's really hard to then also build in flex and a plan B all the time. But we've just realized that you have to be thinking about different scenarios and be ready and have some things in your hip pocket if you need to go in a different direction.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like scenario planning is something often in organizations, we're so busy in the day to day and the reality of what's in front of us in that moment. And especially in high production environments where we're really driving towards, whether it's quarter end or, period end or whatever it might be. And I was really thinking about, because everybody's complaining in Canada about our rollout of the vaccine. And I hear so often people are like, why didn't they have like the scenarios ready? Why weren't they ready to go? And I'm thinking, but this is the classic thing, right? That we do in organizations is, we're so busy often in the day to day that carving out that time to really do that future thinking. And sometimes it feels like, oh, is this a waste of time? Because I've got all these fires over here that I have to kind of take care of, right? One of the things that we talked about before, and this is like, I feel like every time I go into my LinkedIn feed, I'm seeing things about mental health, burnout, surge capacity is depleted, da 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 da. And I know in our pre-call we were kind of chatting about it, and where the reality of corporate business is that you're in there to increase production, and that's part of the, I suppose, the the employment contract that we all have. And, you know, we always joke around with a lot of our clients, like, when was the last time your boss said to you, do less this year than you did last year? Like, we never get that message, right? And I know for you guys, you were in one of the sectors that really was running really hard. I mean, everything really blew up for you. And as we're, you know, now kind of coming through, but we're still in this stage of uncertainty. I think when I look at the younger leaders that, you know, we often see in a lot of our programs that are sort of that earlier stage of leadership career or have young children at home, they've been feeling like a lot of pressure right now to maintain those big targets while dealing with suddenly this additional, in some cases, an additional job responsibility on the home front if they're dealing with family issues. Or I've got others that are dealing with aging parents and they're having to deal with that other end of the spectrum on things. And I guess, you know, I think as two probably type A overachievers way back in the start of my career, I think, is there anything that you would share about what advice would you give for people that maybe are putting a lot of pressure on themselves right now during this time and feeling that additional pressure? Like, what have you learned about that? And, you know, burnout's the word du jour these days, it seems. Any insights?
Yeah, I think, you know, early in my career, I definitely experienced moments of burnout, and I didn't even have a pandemic to deal with,
Yeah, I
right?
know, me
Like,
too.
it's all bad, and now there's so much more on top of everything.
Yeah.
And I remember when I started out in my career, it was like, oh, this job is so busy and
Mhm.
work all the time. And then I'd get another job, be like, this job is so busy. And then it really came to the realization that it's not the job, it's me. I'm the one that's, you know,
Yeah.
that's doing all this. And I started to look around and see people that were successful and they weren't working as hard as I was working as hard. And they, you know, but they were still really successful. And I was like, well, what are they doing? And the key was they had figured out to do things that drove results that mattered and to do the most important things versus I was trying to do everything at 100%. The perfect PowerPoint presentation, the perfectly, you know, worded document, the perfect, like everything on my checklist checked off to the nth degree. And it wasn't productive. I realized that wasn't productive to actually progressing your career and being successful. And so that was a big learning for me. And, you know, part of the other piece is like I was historically bad at putting my health first and looking after myself. And I had to start to realize internally, like, what were my symptoms when I was starting to reach points of burnout or starting to get to that stress zone that wasn't productive. And so I realized, you know, the things that were happening to me when I was starting to get into that zone. And so I think that having that self-awareness for yourself is really important. And then the third piece is really when you start to realize that you have to do something. You have to, you know, change something that you're doing yourself. You have to ask for help. You have to talk to your manager about priorities. You can't stay silent and you can't just try and tough it out and just continue to go in that direction because it's, you know, it's not going to be good for you personally or for your health, and you're going to be less and less productive. You think you're doing more, but you're actually just spinning.
Yeah, that's so true. And I can remember years ago when I worked at consultancy, one of our consultants, he used to brand himself as the Dr. Phil of Canada. His name was Dr. Harvey Silver, and he was a real character. And he used to talk about all pressure is internal. So we are the ones that put pressure on ourselves. And he used to do a demo where we would get people to come up and put their arm out, and he would say, your arm is a steel rod, nobody can bend your arm, blah, blah. And he would then put all his weight and the person's arm would be like super steel. And then he would say, your arm is a piece of jello, it's so flimsy you can't hold it up, da, da, da. And then he would do the same thing, and then the arm would like flop right down, right? It was this really great sort of I don't know, like parlor game, I don't know, but it was this idea of like your thoughts really create your reality. And
Mhm.
so I'm curious for you when you said, you know, I start to pay attention to the things that are happening to me that show me that I'm getting triggered. How does it show up for you? Like I know how it shows up for me. Like I get frustrated, irritable, I'm not the nicest person, I'm very impatient. Like, and that's when I start to go, okay, you're getting a little bit crispy here. Like this is a time to step back. How does it manifest for you? What's your kind of red flag mechanism for yourself?
Yeah, I have 10 symptoms. I don't think we need to go through all of them.
Oh, wow. That's good.
But I would say the irritability for sure that starts to come to the forefront and just very short,
Mhm.
and that I just don't have the patience to deal with things. I think the lack of being able to find solutions. There's just don't see solutions. You can't see a way of getting out. And when you stop seeing solutions, that's a huge sign that your resilience is struggling. And then I think like there's other things too. Like I just stop drinking water. I stop, you know, having proper meal planning or whatever it is. I stop exercising. Just on and on and on of just not doing the things that I know will keep me healthy and energized.
Mm. Yeah, I could relate to so many of those. And I do think it is that often the things that we let go of first are the things that we need the most, right? Like, I don't have time to work out tonight. I'm just going to power through and get this work done. And I always loved Tony Schwartz from the Energy Project wrote this article. It's very old now, but it was called The Corporate Athlete. And his analogy was that this is our Olympics, right? Like for you and I showing up every day, this is our Olympics. And athletes do not train every day. They don't train themselves to exhaustion, right? They have those moments, but then they go into recovery. And we just are not great at recovery in our organizations. We really love being busy, right? Like it's like we got to wear the busy badge.
Yeah, and I think I dropped saying the word busy a long time ago. Like there was a stage of my life where I was so busy and, my to know how busy I was. And so I really stopped using the word busy to describe my life and myself. And that just helps you also connect into what's really going on, because busy isn't really a feeling. It can't really describe, how are you? Oh, I'm busy. Well, that doesn't really describe how you are.
Mm.
So I think that was a key pivot for me. And then also, like really doing so I would put blocks of time in my calendar. That is a key one for me that I still do. When I know that I'm going to have busier time periods coming up, I block off time in the weeks leading up to it. So I have that space to properly prepare or think or whatever I need to do. I put all my exercise in my calendar. I block it off. I put it in. It's an appointment. I need to get to it like I would anything else.
Mm.
And so just doing some, tips like that to hold myself accountable.
I think that's great though. And I do think that a lot of people let their calendar manage them versus them managing their calendar, right? I flip flop back and forth. I'm a very low structure person. So for me, I do have to have that structure in my calendar, because if I don't have that, then I can look up and my calendar will be
Mm.
completely out of control. And then I know I'm not at my best because I'm just running from fire to fire, and that thinking time and all that time you need to just replenish, right, is gone. So I see we've got a question that's come in. And the question is, since you're fairly new in your role, what helped you demonstrate the value you bring as a C-suite executive? So I guess that really, why were you chosen, Cara? What was it about?
Debatable, but so I think, the way that I approach the role, so it's a general manager role. My previous roles were largely in customer sales, field sales, a little bit of strategy, and a couple of other areas. But the way I approached the role was I was very clear on where my areas of strength and knowledge were, and then I was very clear on where my areas of, opportunity and less knowledge were. And I talked about that openly, and I talked about it with my team, and I built a plan to increase my knowledge in other areas and then continue to leverage the strengths that I had. And so, the areas of value that I would say that I could bring to the role is that I have a lot of knowledge about the business. So I've been at PepsiCo now for over 16 years. I know the business, I know the teams, I know how it works. So that was very helpful. And then also being able to bring, I was very much about getting the right team in place, empowering that team, letting them make the decisions, and really providing more transparency across our organization and more communication. Those were some of my early goals.
Mhm.
And then the areas that wasn't I familiar on, the marketing team, for example, built me a learning plan. And then we ended up expanding it to the entire leadership team so we could all, be a little bit more knowledgeable about the consumer and how we approach our marketing programs. Supply chain was another area, supply chain and IT. When they talk, they're talking, they're using acronyms. That's a whole other language. And I think, for me, I just had to really leave my ego at the door coming into this role and not be afraid to ask the stupid questions and truly come into it from a place of learning. And then I tried to add value by asking good questions. So I may not understand the exact process and what needs to happen, but I can ask some questions to help people think about things in a different way or considering things from a different angle. And so those are a few of the things I did to try and add some value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I really, I mean, you've said so many things in there, and there's a couple of things that I really love and would love to sort of maybe talk a little bit more about is this idea of taking control of your own career path, right? So really assessing for yourself, where do I have the learning opportunities here? Getting the breadth across the organization. In terms of like if somebody's, again, earlier on in their career and they're trying to think about what they need to do, because I find a lot of people are hesitant to say where they've got gaps. They feel like if they let people know what they're not good at or what they have a limited view on, or they feel that they have to be an expert in everything, and so those sort of can hold them back. But what advice would you have to help somebody get started and maybe taking more control of their career and figuring out how to move themselves forward?
I think it's hard sometimes because you don't even know what you don't know, right? You don't know what all the roles are that are an option. You don't, and then things change over time as well. So there's a lot of roles that I did that actually didn't even exist when I was earlier in my career.
Right.
So I think it's, you need to make a few key decisions. And so one, always start with your values first. So what do you value? What is most important to you in your life as a whole? So if it's relocation and you want to be open to new opportunities, or if it's, hey, I can't relocate for family reasons or personal reasons, whatever it is. And, just really establishing first what you want out of life. And then when you start to think about your career, I think one of the early decisions you have to make is, do you want to be functionally deep and a functional expert? Or do you want to have more of a general manager mindset and take on broader general management roles? And those are two very different skill sets, and it will depend some of your career moves. And then I think it's really just, talking to a lot of people, talking to your mentors, sponsors, managers, and just saying like, what does your job look like if you think something's interesting, and tell me more about that, and how did that help you in your career, and what types of experiences are out there that I could get. And then you start shaping your career path. And so for me, I didn't necessarily say I'm going to be the president. It was more about thinking a couple of roles out and what it would take to get to that role, really building my skill set, my capabilities. And then once I got to that role, and then it was like, okay, now I need to look a couple of roles further out. And it just kind of was a progression.
Yeah, I love that. And to me, one of the differentiators I often see for folks that uh, expand or move up is that curiosity. I find if you can cultivate your curiosity, it's really helpful in terms of making sure that you are on the right track with what you want to do in your career path. But asking those questions and digging deep, such a great skill for, I think, anybody to have, leader or, whether you choose leadership or not.
And I think
So,
it's also important that I should state that not all of my moves in my career were progressively higher in terms of level. I went to lower level jobs because I wanted to learn different things. I did lots of same role level jobs in just different areas. So it's not always just this straight line up progression. It's not the ladder, right? It's more of the truth.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's interesting because I've got a friend of mine who's just written a book called The Squiggly Line Career, and I'm going to have her on at the end of May talking about that very thing, like taking like lateral move. I've had a very squiggly line career myself, and I think there's something, I think when your focus is on the rung of the ladder, you often miss opportunities to deepen your own learning about yourself, and also open yourself up to maybe other possibilities that you hadn't thought about because you were, thinking about that next level up.
Mhm.
So Nancy asked the question, do you have advice for someone wanting, this is a great question, for someone wanting to move from a specialty to a broader role? Sometimes people find themselves in that specialty role and they actually want to get broad, but they find that they're limited because they've been in a specialty role. So any thoughts on how you would do that?
I've definitely done that. I was in a customer role for the first 8 years of my career, so very functionally strong. But I did want to go learn a different part of the business. I wanted to go learn our field operations side of the business. And so that involved a lot of conversations. And people were like, are you sure? It's going to be a 4-level drop for you. You're going to be on the trucks delivering chips. Like, are you sure this is what you want to do? And I was like, yes, I want to learn this business from the ground up because I had that curiosity about it. And I felt that it would be a solid foundation to then taking on future roles, versus if I stayed in the customer lane, I wouldn't understand the business as well. I think it depends a lot on your company. There are some companies that are very much, you're in the customer team and you're in the customer role and that's your career, and they don't see the value as much in switching, or think it's too challenging for people. PepsiCo, we're pretty flexible. We've had people in finance go to marketing. We've had people in, sales go to operate. Like, we're pretty open to it. But it does really require lots of conversations and defining what your ultimate goal is, I think. So how will this broadening role help you in your career and help the organization? And I do think there's a lot of value. So it's just, having those right conversations with the right people.
Yeah, I think one of the things I notice for people is that when you ask them, where do you see yourself in 3 years or 5 years, they really struggle with that question. It's a hard question to answer. And I know for myself personally with my career, and I use this analogy a lot when I'm asked to give like career presentations, I used to describe whatever job I was in that moment, I used to describe it as a pie. And every slice of the pie was a different flavor, like the activities. So I might have a piece of pecan pie, peach pie, whatever pie, right? And some I really enjoyed eating and others I couldn't stand. And so when I was starting to look for my next role, I was always looking for, okay, I really like lemon meringue pie. So I want something that's going to give me more lemon meringue pie and maybe some other pies that I haven't tried yet. And that was really in my 20s. I feel like in your 20s is such a great time to take some career risks and try some different things, because you want to sort of start to hone in on what am I enjoying and what do I want to do more of. And so for me, career has always been more about the experiences I wanted to have versus the destination of wanting to be a vice president by the time I'm X age or a president by the time I'm Y age. And I think that that's allowed me to explore without I guess feeling judgment or boxed in that the choice I make has to be the end game choice. And it sounds like for you something similar, like it wasn't necessarily driven by that's going to get me ultimately to be the president of PFC, but it was more, I'm curious about this and I want to expand myself that way.
I think so. And I think sometimes you don't even know what you're going to like.
You don't.
Like the way I ended up into a career path of sales was totally by accident and a couple of choices, and then really found a passion for it. And then when I took on different roles in the organization that were totally different from what I'd done before, you see the value, you see the learning, you see the different aspects that come to it. And so you just you can be a bit surprised, I think, in what you enjoy doing.
So on that note, you've now been in this president role for 18 months or so, give or take a few. And so what are you enjoying the most about this position that maybe you weren't expecting to enjoy? What sort of opened up for you as you've kind of been able to step into this role?
I think that, right now the role is very different because it's a pandemic. There's elements that are the same, but I think there are elements that are different because of pandemic, both good and bad.
Mm.
Overall, I would say that I'm really enjoying I'm enjoying the breadth of the role. So I really love learning more about supply chain. I love learning more about our digital journey in IT and where we're headed. I love learning about how we're delighting the consumer and hearing consumer stories. And so you get a little bit of everything in this role for sure. So I really love that part of it. I also love connecting with people. And so that part's been harder through COVID, because normally I would be in plants and in the market and visiting across the country. So I've been trying to do that through different forums and different, Zoom pop-ins or some roundtables or one-on-ones, and just trying to keep those connections so I can have a pulse on the organization and what's going on. And then the last thing I would say is I'm really enjoying working with the leadership team that I have. So I think that, we came together before the pandemic. We talked about our team effectiveness and what we wanted to do as a team. And then through the pandemic, I think we became even closer, high levels of trust on the team. And I would say that we're a high performing team. And, that's really fun to come to work every day with people that you trust and that energize you. And you know that, everyone's in it together.
Yeah, I think this pandemic really, for many organizations, it it really galvanized, it amplified what was already there. Like if you were a good team, like I would say from my experience with my team, I have a phenomenal team too. And it really galvanized us in a very different way. And it is almost like, I'm going to use it, like, it's kind of like you went to war together and you've got the, you've had this collective experience, which is just bonding at a deeper level. And yet I know other teams like, that we've seen or talked to that have not had that experience, where it's been a real struggle to get through. And what would you say, like, being part of the senior executive team, were there certain things that you, I guess, see has been a factor to help you get to that high performance, or that have been in place within the culture of this senior team that you see as being super critical to, being able to perform at the level that you've been able to perform at?
I heard a great quote on Friday. So we had a speaker come in. Her name is Dr. Marette Wettelsberg, and she's a psychologist. And she talked about just resilience through the crisis and how to keep teams going. And her quote was, teams don't rise to the occasion of a crisis. They fall to their level of capabilities. And I think that, if you didn't do the work on being a high performing team before, it's not going to be there just because it's a crisis.
Right.
You have to put in the work.
Right.
And so I think it's that openness and willingness to continue to try and be better. And I think, like mentioned it, but trust is so critical and so important. And I feel like if you feel that everyone on the team has positive intent and has your best interest in mind and is doing what's best for the overall company, that helps build that trust. And then that makes it so much easier to empower people. And then they feel that energy from being empowered, and it just, it goes throughout the organization. So you got to do the work.
Yeah. And I think it's so true. And I always reminded, anytime you come back to the simple models, and I always think about Pat Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of Team model. And he talks
great
about
book.
trust. Yeah. And trust is the basis, right? Like you can't have constructive conflict if there isn't trust. You can't get, commitment to a problem if you haven't had the constructive conflict. Like that little model, and it all does come down to that trust. Okay. We've got more questions flowing in. So next one, as a woman in such a high position, any advice on how to get over self-doubt and gain more confidence, especially in leading?
I think that in the past, I definitely struggled with that critical voice on your shoulder. That was you're not good enough at this, you're not doing this well enough, you're da 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 da. And so I think we spend so much time on self-awareness and understanding our opportunity areas. And I think that's all very good, and that helps with your development. But you also then need to have self-acceptance, where you are accepting who you are as a person. And then you need to have self-compassion. You have to be able to cut yourself some slack And you have to talk to yourself in a better way, because the things you say to yourself, you would never say to anyone else, but you think it's okay to talk to yourself that way. So I definitely had to recognize that over the years and get over that. And then I think that you build your self-confidence by realizing that you can do things and you can get through certain situations. So I've been in situations in the past that I didn't think I'd find a way out of, and then I did.
Yes.
And so then at some point you just have to trust yourself, because you've done this before in the past, and you know that you can figure out a way again in the future. So I think it's a journey. I think everyone has their ups and downs and their moments of doubts, but you just have to keep powering through and believe in yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, so many things in there. That self-compassion piece I think is huge. And I think when you're a type A overachiever, speaking for myself here, it's a hard one to not be, continually. It's been hard for me to sink into accepting something as being good and not feeling the need to, well, I could have done this better, or I could have done that, like just to live in the acceptance of, okay, that was good. And I think this inner critic, a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome, like having imposter syndrome. And I say, everybody has imposter syndrome in some form or another. And I think it's the challenge for all of us to kind of move through that and to be able to, but it's work. Like I would say, I still have imposter syndrome, but other things that I had imposter syndrome over years ago are not the same. Like I've evolved, but I still have work to do. And I think that's just the journey for all of us that we're on, is recognizing that it's going to be a journey, progress, not perfection. That's the expression we like to use in the room.
Like sometimes you're just going to have to fake it till you make it. but I think, for me with imposter syndrome, for sure, I had that early in my career. And especially as you become a leader and a leader of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, every single role that I backfilled, I was coming into role after a man. So every single job I've done, there was always a man that did it before me, every single job. And the man was also very different from me from a life point of view. So married, children, different age, etc. And so it just took a while for me to feel comfortable in my own skin as a leader, because I couldn't really emulate the leaders who'd been there before me, because I wasn't that person.
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely took a while.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is, though, that what you said, like then when you do those things, that builds your confidence. I always say the biggest career killer is being in your comfort zone for too long. Like if you're really comfortable, go do something that makes you uncomfortable, because that's what really builds your confidence muscle, because you prove to yourself, hey, I could come through this. Right. Like I think any times I've had a crisis of confidence, and I remember somebody saying this to me, yeah, but Glenn, you've gone through the fire and you're going to come through the fire again. And I'm like, yeah, that's the thing to keep in mind. But if you play it safe, and that's why I see people who've had very safe careers, they've always been promoted, they've never had a failure. I worry about those people, because you have to know what it's like to, kind of had the knees knocked out from under you and get back up again, because that's what builds that internal resilience, I think, that we need as leaders.
You're right. I've failed lots throughout my career, lots of different times, lots of different failures.
Oh man.
Yeah. And it is true that those are the times when you learn the most. You learn the most about yourself. You learn the most about how to navigate through different situations. And it's a huge critical piece of my toolbox that's enabled me to get here.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so a couple of questions. Zev's got a couple of questions. The first one is, what strategies do you follow to ensure that you're getting unfiltered information now that you're in a senior position? And then a follow-up question, were there any books and articles that were impactful for you as you made the transition to the role of president?
So the first one on unfiltered information, it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible to know what's really going on. It's almost impossible to get real feedback sometimes. So you just have to keep asking questions and asking multiple people, for the same questions in different ways, and trying to have a pulse on what's going on. And then you triangulate. I think I also heavily rely on my team. I feel like we're the type of team that if we don't agree with each other, we feel comfortable talking about it and talking about if we're not aligned with something, or if they're hearing different things from the teams, they definitely bring that to the forefront. So I heavily rely on that. And yeah, but it's really hard. It's really hard to get a feel when, sometimes people may just be telling you things that they think you want to hear, or softening what it is they want to hear. So
do you find that more as you go below your immediate like senior executive team? Is it when you're getting into levels below that people feel they need to manage their impression with you more?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I find that interesting because I will have people say, I'll use your name, but I'm not saying that people have said this to me about you, but they will say, oh, I don't want Cara to know that I don't have all those info. And I always say, well, why not? Like, what is it that, you're trying to hide, or what are you concerned about? What's the fear in that, right? But you're right. Like, I mean, it really you have to be really persistent and consistent, I think, in terms of pulling demonstrating, no, I want to hear your opinion. Please bring it to me. And you have to keep working at that all the time. And when you get that power position, right? Because we don't like to acknowledge, but you're in a power seat. You're in the power seat, right?
Yeah. So I have to make sure that people feel comfortable telling me things. I have to make sure that I'm listening and open to that feedback, all of those things to try and create the space. It's still challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Okay, and books and articles that were helpful to you as you made the transition.
So I reread The First 90 Days, and I've read it multiple times throughout my career, and I do find that the perception changes for you for different roles, and the things that I take away from it are different depending on the different role. So I definitely did that. I power read through that on the weekend before I came into the role. So that was helpful. And then, oh gosh, I feel like I've been reading a ton of books over the last year, a lot of them pandemic related. I just read Your True North, about your authentic leadership, and just how you can continue to tap into being an authentic leader. There's a ton out there.
What's one leadership book that really had an impact on you? Is there one that really jumps to mind that changed how you thought about leadership or how you thought about yourself?
I think one of the early ones was The Heart of Coaching. So I would say The Heart of Coaching, and then Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits. Lots of great nuggets of wisdom in there. But The Heart of Coaching was really, for me, how do I shift from being an individual contributor to start being a leader and start being a coach and start asking more questions, and just really shifting my capabilities ultimately. Because there's also that book about like what got you here won't get you there, or whatever that one is.
Yeah.
And you have to change your capabilities and your skill sets as you go into higher roles.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I remember before I did my advanced coaching program as a manager, I was always told that I was a great coach. And then I did my coaching program. And I'm like, I was a terrible coach. I was a great advice giver, maybe like a motivating kind of way. And I mean, I probably did ask a few questions here and there, but it is such a different skill set, and one that as managers we're not rewarded for. We're rewarded for making decisions and taking action and solving problems. And so often coaching where it's like, stay quiet, stay curious, ask more questions, let the person work through their own thing.
Capabilities, right? Like build their capabilities. Don't just tell them what to do. Yeah.
It's very counterintuitive to how we get rewarded in many other ways in a leadership role. Okay, so here's another question. Oh, interesting, juicy one, workplace politics. So how do you navigate workplace politics at your level, and any advice to manage that necessary politics, especially at a senior management level? So what are your thoughts on politics and yeah, I mean, they exist, but navigating them.
I'm pretty low drama. So I don't really have a lot of time for things that are just, I'm trying to find a word that's not a swear word, but things that are not a good use of time. I think that it's important to be conscious of people that have an impact on your career. And that ties into sponsorship.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a good way to always have people that have your back and can give you good perspective as you're trying to work through things in the organization.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, I mean, it's interesting when you say politics, like I once read the series about the different types of political games that get played in organizations. And there's a reason. So the meeting before the meeting, they would say that, that's a form of politicking, right? So I've got to get my alignment in place before I go into this meeting in order to smoothly move everything through. And there's some people, like I am one of the people, that I have all kinds of time for that. I don't mind maneuvering that. I get that that's how the game's played. It doesn't bother me. And yet I've worked with many other people that hate that. My husband's one of them. Like, what you see is what you get. I don't want to have to deal with this. I'm not going to pre-align anybody on anything. So I think also how we view politics and organization is also where we get energy from ourselves, and if you don't, if you view it more, because I even hear people say, well, that's not really politicking, that's just finessing, or that's just getting the thing through. But somebody else would say, oh, that's totally political that you had to align everybody. But isn't it just a bit of the nature of the beast? I mean, I think about, when you're a part of a global corporation like PepsiCo, I'm sure you're thinking about, how do I need to bring Canada's agenda to the table, and who are the players that I need to involve around that? That's just, isn't that just sort of the nature of any of the kind of senior leadership roles that we play?
Yeah. And so for me, I don't know that I'd call that politics. I would call that advocacy. You definitely have to be an advocate for your business, and you definitely have to gain support and collaboration. And I definitely try and do all of those things. Like, my boss is the CEO of North America. The US is a giant business. Canada is a smaller portion of that business. And so you have to find the appropriate way to be on the radar screen and get the resources and commitments that you need.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing that in the right way. So definitely spend time against things like that. The pre-alignment, I think, is a big waste of time. I think that, you need to have, some right pre-conversations to make sure you're getting all the ideas into it. But we stopped doing that. If people are coming to me before the meeting, I'm like, this is a waste of my time. I don't need to hear this.
Don't pre-align me. Yeah, no, that's great. And I think that's often too, I love that comment about advocacy. And I suppose that's also the reality that I'm thinking, if there's anybody in the audience who has ambitions to become into like a role that you're playing, recognizing that is part of the job. It's almost like a sales role. I could see why sales would actually suit, for you, that I'm sure that background comes in handy when you're thinking about, okay, when we're the smaller portion, how do I keep our agenda on the radar? And sales, I think in many cases for many leaders is such a great skill set to have. Would you say?
Yeah, I think that it can sometimes be seen as an undervalued skill, for sure. There's not a lot of courses on sales in university or whatever it is. I think it's changing a little bit now. But yeah, like it's, great communicators. Typically people in sales have great communicators. They can present well and communicate their ideas well. They understand the importance of collaboration and building networks and relationships. So yeah, lots of great skills that can carry through.
And the ability to influence, I think when I hear you talk about your career path and getting understandings of other part of the business also allows you to see the connectivity between maybe what you're trying to move forward and how it will affect other parts of the business, in order to be able to talk to them in a way that is their language, and in a way that meets their needs and objectives. I have a friend of mine who teaches senior executives on how to make compelling presentations. And she says one of the big mistakes everybody makes is that they sell from their own value set and not from the value set of the person that they're talking to. And so I think, often I see people undervaluing the importance of understanding the breadth of the organization and how their area impacts other areas, and seeking to understand that so that they can build that connectivity.
Yeah, what's in it for me, right? Like everyone wants to know what's in it for me, and making sure that you understand the benefits for other people as well, not just yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. Okay. So You mentioned your role is different because of the pandemic. What are you most looking forward to when we are past the pandemic?
What aren't I looking forward to?
Everything.
Oh, I mean, from a personal standpoint, it's just, I'm really excited to see people. I haven't seen my family in over a year. Lots of friends I haven't been able to see, and, all of my coworkers coast to coast. So I've seen them on Zoom a lot, but not in person, which is different. So yeah, really looking forward to getting out there. We also are moving into a brand new office at some point when it's safe to do so. So I think that's going to be really exciting. We're going to be moving in with our beverage counterparts. So that'll be really fun. And so just looking forward to the energy and excitement that that'll bring.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we're all missing that connectivity. I think I was talking just earlier this morning to somebody that I remember when I started my business, it was just I felt like there was just so much debate about, well, you don't need bricks and mortar to run a business. You can be virtual forever. And I personally couldn't make it work with a roundtable. I mean, we got office space as soon as I could get office space. Because of collaboration and connection, like and learning and helping people ramp faster. I just found that having a space where we could convene when we needed to convene was helpful. It wasn't about mandating working there, but it was more this idea of convening. And I think I think there's been a big realization around that over this past year, is that yes, you can do a lot of things virtually. There's a lot of things you do not need to be sitting at your desk to do. However, all of those spaces in between, I really feel like, innovation and collaboration and a lot of those other things that just sort of emerge in the space in between.
And especially if you're new to an organization as well, right? Like for me, at least I know everyone. I can, figure out who I can talk to and when. But if you're brand new to an organization, you haven't met people, you don't know who they are, you haven't built up any type of personal rapport from just being at the coffee machine together. I think that's really, really hard for people.
I agree. It's much harder to build those sort of bonds that are so helpful in helping you move work through as well. Okay, so one last question, and I think that's perfect timing. So this is again on the heels of International Women's Day. How do you handle unconscious bias directed at yourself or others? So I think as women, and especially and I love your story about, I was always walking in behind a man who had a very different style from me. But this unconscious bias that exists, and we all have biases. If you have a brain, you have a bias, my friend would say. How have you handled it? And I guess on that note, what are you doing within PepsiCo around inclusion and starting to, keep pushing I know you guys do such a great job on this anyway, but just continuing to push the boundaries on that.
I mean, I definitely see it. Like I see the bias. So a good couple of examples that most people at PepsiCo know is that when I first became the president, we'd go out on a market tour, we'd go to a store, and the store manager, whoever, would come up and say like, "Oh, the president's here. Which one is he?" And look at all the men that I was with, and then they'd look at me and I'd be like, "Hi." So there was definitely a lot of that, and then there was also a little bit, even when people knew the president was coming to visit them in a different scenario, and everyone's introducing themselves, and I'd say, "Oh, hi, I'm Cara." And they'd say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I say, "Oh, I'm the president." And this look of surprise, like truly shocked, a look of oh, and then trying to backpedal that, so I just think that people still, when they think of a president, have a certain image in their mind, and I am not that person. So all I can try and do is change some perceptions one at a time. And I think there's also a perception of a strong woman leader. And I think what I've been hoping to change for people is that you can be a strong woman leader or just a leader and also be empathetic. And, there's not this perception of like that you have to be one or the other, and trying to break through that bias as well. And then from a PepsiCo standpoint, what we're trying to do, so we have a fantastic women's inclusion network. They do fantastic work, continuing to elevate the bar to make sure that they're helping women internally and also externally outside of PepsiCo. As you know, as total global PepsiCo, we have huge ambitions in terms of our equity journey, in terms of like managerial roles and pay, etc. So lots to feel proud about and lots of great work and continuing to move the bar. And I think for me, yes, I'm the first woman president at PFC, but I do not want to be the last. And that's, what I'm trying to get across, that, there are lots of women at PepsiCo that could step up into big roles, and hopefully I can help motivate, inspire, encourage, and build their confidence as well.
Well, Cara, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I think you've dropped so many great words of wisdom and advice for everybody. And as everybody knows, I will be kind of pulling out my top 3 nuggets, and we'll be sending out the recording of this so everybody can kind of share that with your teams, because I think you've just given us so much wisdom today. And I really, really appreciate the time that you've spent with us. Thank you so much.
It was nice chatting with you, and thanks to everyone for asking questions and participating.
Yeah, great questions today, everybody. All right, so I have a few final notes. So those of you who are new to the roundtable, I like to call us a group coaching company. We do group coaching, we do group mentoring, and we also do team coaching work. So if we can help you in any of those areas, as Cara mentioned, we've been a long-term partner of PepsiCo. We're so proud of that great company to work with. But feel free to reach out to me. If you are looking to maybe, if you're in a company that isn't as big as PepsiCo, but you're curious about the kind of program that Cara mentioned at the start, we do run it twice a year on open enrollment. We have 3 seats left in our spring cohort. It's kind of a senior manager, director level cohort. So reach out if you want more info on that. And if you want to DIY it, you can grab a copy of my book, and I've sort of given a roadmap to doing your own peer group programs through the Grassroots Leadership Revolution. We have a number of groups that are going that are part of the community. So if you're interested in starting one, reach out to us, and we'll also maybe help you get one started. So next session coming up for us is with my friend Naomi Titleman-Kola, who is going to be talking about workplace 3.0. So what does the post-pandemic life need to look like? How do we need to think differently? So do tune in for that. Naomi is one of the smartest people I know on this subject, and just it's going to be a great conversation. So thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Cara. Always a pleasure. And I just, wish you continued great success with all the work you're doing at PepsiCo.
Thanks, Glenn.
All right. Bye, everyone.